colors creep while you and me repeat. This bittersweet heat is suffocating. I'm waiting and always hesitating. Kryptonite desires set my heart afire.
Men, women, gods, and embers, welcome to Burning Questions. Just like the All-Father, we'd give an eye for knowledge. On today's episode, we have the man of 1,000 years, Augustus Lupus Martis. Would you kindly tell us about yourself and your history, of course?
Oh, absolutely. So, my name is Augustus Martis. I am a Roman demigod, son of Mars. I hunt monsters for a living. Whenever I have some free time, I play some video games and DM for my friends. I am currently a whopping 33 years old in this incarnation. But this is by and far not my first incarnation. You kind of nailed it right on the head when you said, a man of 1,000 years, because, it's actually closer to 2,000 years, since this is going on my 2,040-year-old mark, as far as reincarnations are considered. I've been around since the time of the Roman Empire, and I keep reincarnating every time I die because, Jupiter is not too happy with me. He's made that abundantly clear by cursing me never to be able to rest in Hades. So every time I die, my soul floats around until the next time that my father decides to have relations with a human woman. So there are some time gaps where I was not walking this mortal world, but there's, for the most part, always been an Augustus.
Oh, okay, I see. So you've been doing this whole warrior thing for like 1,000 years, and from my understanding, the way that you've explained it, every time your father Mars is having relations with a human woman, you get reincarnated.
Well, as long as I'm not already alive, yes. So there are time periods where I've had half brothers and half sisters. Such as specifically, I can think of. I had quite a few half brothers and half sisters running around during World War II. Specifically, it's never fun running into a sibling on the battlefield when they're fighting for the opposite team. But that does occur from time to time, unfortunately. Additionally, it's more along the lines of anytime my father will have relations. Kind of the way that the curse works is that my father is he has a thing for redheads, I will say.
Redheads.
Specifically, yes. So anytime
That makes sense, actually.
it's kind of hard to see, but in my hair you can probably get a little bit of undertones of reds, and you can't really make them out. But I also have a lot of freckles because, my mother is either typically Scottish or Irish descent. Not always, but most of the time. And that's also because the first incarnation of Augustus was a half Roman, half Celtic woman. And that's one of the reasons that Jupiter deemed it appropriate to curse me.
Your Jupiter cursed you because they don't like the Celts.
Well, so there was a battle that occurred.
Sure.
Specifically. So this is one of the things I'm cursed with terrible memory of history, kind of because my multiple incarnations, my memories always start filtering back as I live longer with the curse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is that, like, I will have flashes and remember things from my past. It always comes in like these like lightning bolt moments, right? Like I will say something I'll be very upset. I'll say something, and I'm like, wait, how did I know that? Or how, like, where did that come from? Like, how could I have known that, right?
Okay, I see.
But the very first Augustus, who was, like I said, he was half Roman, half Celtic. He was blamed for the loss at the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in the 9th century, or 9 CE.
Mm-hmm.
So specifically, while I was not the praetor at the time, I was a high-ranking legionnaire, and the praetor at the time was actually a son of Jupiter. So Jupiter essentially used me as a fall goat or a scapegoat for that failure, cursing me to, forever walk the plains of mortals, and never be able to rest in Hades. Or as my father Mars actually wanted me to. I was on kind of a fast track to take the Hercules route and eventually end up as a full-fledged god.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, Jupiter was like, no, none of that. If you've ever met Jupiter or heard anything about him, you will know that is very much within his wheelhouse to behave like the guy's not the greatest. And I will often bring up embarrassing moments for him whenever I curse. Such as, goose fucking on Olympus is one of my favorite curses.
Fair enough. That makes a lot of sense. Kind of weird though that that's essentially your grandpa, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's essentially your grandpa who just screw you over.
Yes and no, actually. So the funny thing about the Roman Pantheon is that not even the gods themselves they're always kind of hazy on where their birthrights come from. So my father can either be a son of Jupiter, but more likely than that, he's actually a asexual reproduction directly from his mother. But also, some things say that he just sprouted up from the heat of battle. So it's like one of the things is like Jupiter himself has a kind of ongoing feud with Mars. Because unlike with their Greek counterparts, where it's very clear and defined that Zeus is over Ares, in the Roman history and with Roman gods, Mars was often more praised and more highly held than Jupiter was, because of Roman, how much they involved themselves with the arts of war and how those wars were fought. It led to more people praising Mars. So in a lot of ways, Mars was actually held in higher esteem than Jupiter, leading to more of me being punished as a byproduct of a lot of internal politics to the Roman Pantheon, unfortunately.
Okay, I suppose that makes sense. Because it's still kind of sad, though, I have to admit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of different facets to my curse that have led to many heartaches over multiple lifetimes, right? For instance, part of the curse is that I will always fall to who is perceived or is my lover, because Jupiter thought that part of the reason I was blamed for that failure in the Teutoburg forest was because Jupiter thought I was in love with a Germanic warrior, and that I was, essentially fraternizing with the enemy, when in fact I wasn't even then. I was actually, it was just a misunderstanding, and Jupiter, misunderstood what was happening, because gods are not perfect. They have faulty understandings, and, as the case may be, I was not actually fraternizing with the enemy. I was just being wrongly accused, I guess. Okay. But now many of my of their lovers, whether it be their current incarnations, their wife, or a battlefield fling that occurs. But and this is another thing with the curse. I don't always survive long enough for the curse to take its full effect, right? There are times where I will never even be aware that I am a son of Mars. Sometimes I will die too young to actually know that.
If I may ask, do you recall how many times you've been reincarnated?
So yes and no. I can say that I've been at a lot of major wars throughout history, but I can't say for certain how many times that's happened because my memory is not infallible when it comes to my past selves. I have a lot more memories from so for one, I was a American soldier during World War One.
Sure.
I was 17, lied about my age to get into the U.S. Army to go abroad to fight in World War One.
Okay.
Actually, funny enough, I actually met Hemingway, the great author.
Yeah.
I actually met him in that incarnation because he was an ambulance driver in World War One, and whenever it was actually my left arm in that incarnation, I got blown off. So my left arm got blown off in a battle in Germany, and he was the ambulance driver that actually saved my life. So World War One, I remember that one pretty distinctly. I survived that battle, but I died shortly after that. Unfortunately, I died in around 1924. And I do remember my incarnation in World War II. Again, I lied, but this time I was actually British that time. I was actually born and raised in England. So I ended up fighting in World War II as a British counterintelligence officer, which led to actually probably one of my longer lives. Actually, I actually got to act as like a British spy there for a while. That was kind of cool. Survived until like I want to say it was like about 60 or so. And whenever I died after that, I had a shorter life. I don't really remember anything from that one. I don't think I actually ever made it into my knowledge of being a son of Mars for that one. I think that for that one, I kind of lived a pretty peaceful human life. Died at some point in the late 80s. Maybe early 80s. I don't know. There might have been a stopgap again where, because again, if my father doesn't sleep with a redheaded woman there for a while, I'll just kind of exist as a ghost, and I never remember anything from that ghost time periods. But my current incarnation was born in the late 80s. So,
okay, yeah, so that would make you around 30 years old right now, right? Or
yeah,
almost
33.
40? Ah, okay, yeah, 33.
I'm 33. Yeah.
So how do you know that you are the son of Mars usually, like in these kinds of incarnations? Does Mars like drop down and tell you, or do you just discover this like after you lose an arm?
So that's a very good question. So actually, I learned after I lose my arm, specifically. So the part of the curse is that once I will always lose a limb, whether it be an arm or a leg. It changes from incarnation to incarnation. Right now it's my right arm. I know I'm kind of mirrored right now on the stage, but it's actually my right arm currently that is missing.
Oh, okay.
And like I said, in the 1990 or 1991, during the World War I era, I actually lost my left arm. It was actually my left arm that was lost. It was actually his left leg below the knee that he lost from a shelling. But the way that the curse works is that I will not be aware of my godly parentage until I lose a limb, at which point Mars will approach me with a godly prosthetic made by Vulcan. So my right arm is actually completely is made from a material known as Roman gold, and it is, made and forged by Vulcan. as a prosthetic for me. That is presented to me by Mars. That's where I, at that point, become aware of my history and my self, like who I am.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
at that point, I start gaining knowledge of my previous life. I will learn more and more about who I was as time goes on. I have been aware of my current godly personage for about, oh man, about 8 years now, I would say. So, I have about 8 years of memories filtering in at this point. And so again, I don't know everything about all of my previous lives. I do remember doing something during the Crusades, but like nothing really concrete from that time period yet. So maybe as time goes on, I'll remember more.
Okay, I suppose it makes sense. You could always like might have been a knight, or maybe like somebody who was part of like a notable faction, maybe the Teutonic Knights, or maybe the Templars, of course. But the Templars, I suppose, that didn't end well for them.
No, so that's one of the things, like, right? So it's funny because like while I was on the American side and the British side during World War I and World War II, unfortunately, I'm not always on what history perceives as the good guy side, right? And while you're probably right, given that my mother was for sure a redhead, at some point during the crusading eras, probably during the Third Crusade, in all likelihood, I was probably on the losing side for that one, because as history would tell you, they did some pretty fucked up stuff during the Crusades.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I was probably on the side that did that. So it's unfortunate because, like, as a modern person, I can look back and say, hey, a lot of the shit I did in the past was really fucked up, but it was culturally acceptable back then. And that's weird for me, right? To know that my past incarnations were sometimes really bad people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose that, like, considering it's like it's literally your history, because you were probably there with one of your incarnations, you would have seen some things that would have been more appropriate for the time. That, of course, things have changed. We have that. I actually already have that today. Like, something that was okay like 5 years ago is not okay like right now.
Exactly. Like, people used to throw around the R word for mentally handicapped people all the time. Like, and now it's like, if you do that, you will be shunned. Imagine that on a like 300-year or 400-year scale, right?
Yeah.
Like, like I have to live with the knowledge. Right? I probably threw around the N word without like understanding that was not okay, and that's hard for me to accept about myself. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I always have to take into account in the back of my head, because as a person, I try to give people acceptance and I try to forgive people as much as possible. Yeah. Because I have to understand that times change and things are different for them as time goes on. So like, I'm always really forgiving towards people because of having that knowledge of who I am and what I've done in my past.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Can I ask this one weird question though? Were you incarnated during the time of the American Civil War? If so, which side were you on?
So surprisingly, I was. So this incarnation is actually from the American South.
Okay.
So, funny enough, like, I would understand, given that I have a little bit of an accent, where people would say like, "Oh God, you were on this." Actually, no, I was actually, I was on neither side. I was in the West. I was in the American West.
Oh, the far West.
On the side,
okay.
I was, but I fought on the side of the Union during the actual war. But I was actually from, it was actually Colorado, was where that incarnation was born into. But he actually traveled and fought on the side of the Union. Specifically because he felt like that was the right thing to do. Because so he lost his right arm, so he actually lost the same arm as my current incarnation. But he lost that arm in a mining accident, which was like a weird way, because normally the curse works as I will lose the limb either in battle or in service of the military, right? And I think that the reason the curse worked this time was because what I was mining for, the materials I was mining for, was actually being used for the war effort. That's what I'm assuming. I can't say for certain.
Okay, so it's like it's a potential that you were fighting, you were all helping with the war, but not actually like participating unless like much later.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of thinking, right? Is that's how the curse kind of kicked in. I'm not 100% sure. Like, that's one of the things. As a mortal, I can't, like, even as a demigod, I can't say for certain how my own curse works. I can only say, hey, I'm pretty certain that's how it works because of, you know, how I've reincarnated so many times, and I've seen how those things occur. But either way, I'm having to look at it in a sense of that's how the arm was lost either way. Like, no matter how it happened, that's how it happened, right? But my life was actually saved by a Chinese immigrant who was helping in the mines as well. I was stuck in the mines as part of a punishment. I was sent to the mines to kind of pay for some crimes that might or may not have involved some gunslinging.
Sure.
But while I was in the mines, I lost my right arm, and my life was saved by a Chinese immigrant. So after Mars approached me, gave me the godly prosthetic, made me aware of my parentage, and the fact that I was a demigod, and he told me essentially, like, in any time that I become aware of myself as a demigod, I'm always drawn to battle. I'm always drawn to war, either war or, in the case of my current incarnation, I'm drawn serve the Mythos Hunters, which is the organization that I hunt monsters for. But at the time, the Civil War was in full swing, and I went and enlisted with the Union specifically because my life was saved by a Chinese immigrant, and I realized that all humans are humans, and so I sided with the side of the Union, the American Union, which before I was saved, I was not exactly a good person. Like I said, I was a kind of a gunslinging alcoholic before I got sent to the mob, and I might have been a little racist. Again, not exactly proud of some of my reincarnations, but in this case, I am very not proud of who I was before I was saved by that Chinese immigrant and decided to join the Union because of it. So that was one of the things, like, you know, I think I was a little bit more self-aware in that incarnation, especially after, like, I had so in the American South, we call it a coming to Jesus moment, which I know is weird to hear from a Roman demigod, but that's the phrase, right? A coming to Jesus moment. It's essentially when you're like, oh man, I've been fucking up my whole life. I need to really consider what I'm doing.
I see the light now, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I kind of had that moment. I went and joined the American Union, and I fought on that side for the remainder of the Civil War. And that one was probably, I think I might have had like 2 incarnations between then and World War One, but I don't think any of them were actually involved with like any of the major conflicts. I was either too young or too old for any of the conflicts between those 2 time periods, because I don't have any memories from that time period between the Civil War and World War One. I could be wrong. I could always, you know, have those flashes of knowledge come back to me at some point, but as of right now, I don't remember anything.
Fair enough. Okay, before we start with the burning questions, I do want to ask like one thing. Do you think that you've potentially, okay, since you know that you've probably had an incarnation between the Civil War and World War One, do you think that you were involved in perhaps the Philippine-American War or the Spanish-American War?
I could have been. So that's one of the things, is like, with my imperfect knowledge of my previous incarnations, I know that there are time periods where I have so for instance, right, there are many times where I get involved in foreign conflicts as an outside party, right? I was from the American West, but I still got involved in the Civil War because of that draw to conflict. So it's altogether possible that I could have been involved in the Filipino-American War, or the Spanish War, or the War of 1812, or like in the cases of European history, there was a lot of times where I would have, like, if there was no major conflicts occurring in Europe, which is kind of hard to perceive because there's pretty much always been a war happening between Europe and America, right? Like at some point in those two regions, there's always been a war occurring, right? But you have to understand that, like, just because there was a war occurring doesn't mean that there was an Augustus running around. There could be,
true.
and if there was an Augustus running around, he was probably involved in it. But there is one time I do remember that as a European, I ended up in one of China's greater conflicts, which I don't have a lot of memories of it, honestly. I'm gonna have to do some more like research into that history, because I do think it would be very interesting to find out which of those, because China's had some very, very large conflicts that put any European conflicts to shame, right? Like, you can't even compare.
We're not even like including the parts with Mongolia.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the internal conflicts.
Just
China, right? Yeah. So because of that, like, I do know, I have some vague memories of fighting as a European man in the Chinese conflict. But I don't remember enough of them to actually say with certainty which conflicts it was and how involved I was with those conflicts, like which side I fought and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But those are things like, as the longer I live in this incarnation, the more memories I will gain. And the thing is, like, my father, as much as I can reach out to him and speak with him, he is very cagey in regards to telling me about my past selves. There definitely, it seems to be some amount of shame, either for who I am as a son of Mars, or as a, oh fuck, I really don't want to tell you how messed up of a person you were in the past. You know what I mean?
I get what you mean.
Yeah. Because, you know, again, I as good as I try to be, and I'm sure all of my incarnations try to be good, at least what they perceive as good, there's definitely been times where I've not been the guy, and I have to just kind of be okay with that and understand that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think that's enough. We can now start with the burning questions. The actual burning questions this time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
So first, starting off, having the Fist of Mars is of course a tool of war, considering that it comes from the god of war himself. What have you used it for in particular? Is it indestructible, adds strength to you, or does it have more properties than we normally think?
That's actually an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. So the Fist of Mars, my right arm, has quite a few properties that allow me to be more proficient in battle. So one of which is the fact that it amplifies my already demigod, abilities. So as a son of Mars, I am granted and given certain abilities that are superhuman.
Sure.
I am stronger than the normal human. I am faster. It's called battle sense, is kind of what occurs. But like, if I am in a conflict, so funny enough, it doesn't even have to be in a battle. Anything that is I could deem a conflict. So such as I could be debating with someone, and my battle sense can actually start occurring. But I will always find I will always seem to know the best route to victory. Now, if I'm able to carry out that route is another question entirely, because I do end up losing in battles on occasion, right?
Yeah, of course.
But I will always know the best route to victory. My reflexes are faster, my strength is higher, my speed is faster, and all of these kind of amplify in my right arm. So like, of course, I guess I could pull myself up a little bit so you can actually see my arm if you'd like. Give me 1 second. Let me step away from the table a little bit.
Sure.
There we go. All right. So a little bit more. There we go. Hold on a second. Sorry, it's taking a little while to step away from the table. So as you can see, I have these metal claws that come off of my fingers. Those are detachable. Well, they don't detach. They actually retract into the arm itself. And these can be used for scratching and clawing at targets or enemies, allowing me to always have a weapon on hand, even if I am...
Literally.
Yes, exactly. So, like, and these are actually sharp enough to cut through pretty much any armor. I can just shred through, like, Kevlar armor without issue. As being a magical metal, it will always be as sharp as I need it to perform the task at hand, so to speak. The two forearm protectors are both made of the same material. So even on my flesh arm, I have this metal, but it's made out of the same metal as my arm, and actually can withstand any block. Or withstand any blow with zero energy transfer. So it actually completely dissipates any energy going into it. So like Thor could actually swing Mjolnir directly onto my forearm, and it would dissipate all energy from that, and I would take no damage.
It would just like fall to the ground, I'm assuming.
No, so it's funny enough, if I am kneeling with my arm up and he hits that specific piece of armor, all force is dissipated, so I would literally feel no force from it at all. Yeah, so that has saved my life numerous times. So the same thing with my shoulder pad. My shoulder pad is also made of the same material. So like I will often use my right arm as kind of like as a shield to protect me from damage. I have a spear. Can actually transform to and from an axe and a spear between the two, because those were the original Augustus's two weapons they used. Which most Romans used a spear or a gladius, but
like the pilum, right?
Yes, exactly. But I actually used an axe instead because of my Celtic background. I learned how to use an axe from my mother, who was a Celtic she warrior. So I actually learned how to use an axe from her. So now the axe and spear with a shield is always been my armaments. So actually, even though as you can see, I have a pistol on my my left hip or my left thigh, and I use that pistol, to help monsters. Majority of the time, I'm using this spear and axe and shield combination, which are also made of Roman gold. So they carry a lot of the same principles. If you know, like, if you've ever heard of the American comic book Captain America, he's very popular in these day and age. My shield is not like his. It's not vibranium or whatever. I can't like throw it and catch it and shit like that. And it's not indestructible. Like just because it can absorb any amount of force does not mean that it is indestructible. It can actually be melted. That's one of the weak points of the Roman gold, is that it has a very easily reachable melting point. So like I have to be extremely careful when it comes to like fire breathing monsters or things like that. And like I have to be very careful that they don't just like melt my arm off, so to speak. Funny enough, right now I actually have in my possession the Hand of Mars, which was the left arm prosthetic that was given to the World War I surviving Augustus. So I told you before that the World War I Augustus, he died before World War II, of course. But when he died, the Mythos Hunter, he was actually working for the Mythos Hunters, the organization I work for right now. So they retained his left arm, and they kind of gave it to me as a like, hey, now that you've joined us, this is a relic from your past. I'm now considered the custodian of that piece of armor. I'm gonna go ahead and step back to the table. That'll be so, as that case might be, I have to be very careful with. I'm way too big. Let me step back from the table just a little bit. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Sorry, camera. Didn't mean to get all close to you. So the whole movement of these prosthetics is controlled through my demigod powers, which takes a little bit of getting used to.
Okay.
But once I get used to that, the feeling of using those prosthetics, I am stronger, faster, and more in control of those limbs than normal humans are with their own limbs. So I can actually be more dexterous with my right arm than my left arm, even though it is a prosthetic.
Okay. So it makes sense having all of these kinds of equipment aid you in battle, especially with what you're doing right now, which is like fighting monsters, right?
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, that makes sense. So your only quote-unquote armor pieces are your arm, your vambrace, and of course your shoulder pad, right?
Well, I have knee pads made out of the same material that are, so my armor includes my entire right arm, the forearm guards, the shoulder pad, and the knee pads. Those are all the things that I currently use that are made of Roman gold.
Okay, that makes sense. But I do have to ask, I feel like you're missing one very important part of the armor.
What's that?
A groin guard.
So, funny enough, so I do have the ability to, not the ability, I have that equipment available to me. And I used to wear the, you're talking about like the skirt, right? The Roman armor skirts.
Sure.
Yes, I used to wear those quite frequently, but I found that even though they are pretty great with mobility, because of the very key factor of absorption of force is where Roman gold really excels.
Yeah.
Because it's all like that skirting is very loose, it would just swing.
That's a good
knee
point.
Pads, the arm pads, and the shoulder pad all work is because they're braced against my body to absorb that force, right?
Okay.
So the skirt used to be there as well, but because of the way that Roman gold works, it became obvious, like, yeah, this is kind of waste. And actually, that's where the knee pads came from, was melting down the Roman gold from the skirt to make the knee pads. So.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah. So that's one of the things. Like, there is a learning curve, right? What you see now was not my original armaments, and I've kind of come to these armaments through trial and error, so to speak. In fact, I don't know if you saw it, but I actually have knuckle pieces on my left arm.
Yeah.
That I can use for punching, that are made from Roman gold, as also leftovers from that skirt, because the skirt had quite a bit of Roman gold in it. So it's like I had enough to make the knee pads, and I still had some left over. I was like, what would be helpful? Actually having something on my left.
I feel like at some point, maybe in the future or maybe in your past, one of your incarnations might have decided to just gone tired of their glasses getting broken all the time and just melted it down just to make the frame of glasses.
Yeah. So you actually bring up a very good point, right? So a lot of people think oh, you're a Roman demigod, right? You surely don't have any human imperfections, which is not the case at all. So glasses have occurred in the past. For instance, right now, I have a number of spine issues that are from, my time in the military.
Sure.
And allow for this, part of the issue is that, I still have my human side, and while the godly side will compensate and allow me to continue doing, work in the name of my father, the pain and the ache and the suffering is still there. My right arm hurts almost all the time where the metal meets the flesh, but I just kind of accept that and I live with that pain because it is a reminder that I'm still human, that I'm still mortal, and I can die. As part of the curse, I will likely never be able to attain godhood. There is a pathway to reach godhood, but in all likelihood, I will never be able to reach it.
Okay, that I see, but it's still a good reminder that you are still human, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's as in depth as we can get it. Wait, the gold that is in your spine was melted down from the skirt, right? Just to be clear.
No. The gold. So I have a little bit of gold in my spine. Not very much, just a little bit. But the gold in my spine was actually just part of my godly. Whenever I got my my prosthetic.
Okay.
So my prosthetic was essentially put on by Mars himself, and he fused two of my vertebrae together at the same time. So
okay.
is not visible. In fact, I don't even have a scar. Well, I do, but it's so low on my back that my pants cover it normally.
Okay.
But part of the incident that led to my arm being lost, we will say, there was some shrapnel that also did some damage to my spine.
Okay, I suppose it makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, honestly, I got lucky that I wasn't like a demigod stuck in a wheelchair in a lot of ways.
That would have been interesting to see, though. just like a wheelchair that's shaped like a Roman chariot would be cool.
Yeah, I'll have little like metal horses where the feet pads.
Hell yeah! So moving on to the next question. What does the son of the god of war do in his spare time? Because in my head, I'm just thinking about like one of those chads who spend every non-working moment just at the gym making gains.
Surprisingly, no. I do work out. I have a workout routine that is part of my responsibilities as a Mythos Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Physical health is very important to them because who wants to have a chubby guy running out to fight against a chimera?
That would be funny, but also yeah.
Well, actually, so funny enough, we actually do have a son of Dionysus who is quite hefty. But the thing is, like with his demigod parentage, the more drunk he is, the more impervious he is. So funny enough, like he will just get sloshed all the time, and he's pretty much invulnerable while he's drunk, either by luck or by coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Which is really funny. Like he's like you see this like just grossly he's not like grossly obese. I shouldn't say that. He's just kind of like a gross guy, right? He has like wine stains on his shirt constantly, and he's just kind of like he'll like roll up in a battle and like stumbling around drunk, and like people will be like making swipes at him and stuff, and they're just missing because he just stumbles out of the way. You've seen the it's a trope in like Jackie Chan movies.
Yeah, the drunken master, I think.
But he's like legitimately like it's literally his father looking out for him while he's drunk.
That is cool.
Yeah, so he's a good guy. He's a hell of a guy to like have fun with. Funny enough, he absolutely hates being drunk. He will only get drunk when going into like a fight or something. He's like that. He's kind of like the guy who used to be a frat boy and grew out of it, and now he hates drinking.
Ironic.
Yeah, right. And that's one of the things. Like a lot of us demigods end up hating our what we're associated with because we get so tired of it. We get so tired of being involved in that world, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, who wants to be defined by who their parents are, right? Like, no one loves that concept, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, it becoming defined by as like I'm a demigod of war, so it's like I'm defined by war, and it gets tiresome. I want to be more than that. I want to be seen as more than just a, figure of that. But either way, the overall physical activity I do is what's required of me by the Mythos Hunters. So I do like I have a morning routine that I do for workout and so on and so forth. But whenever I have some free time, I like playing video games. I started streaming on Twitch as a demigod against the wishes of the Mythos Hunters. They told me not to do it, and I told them tough shit essentially, and I did it anyways, because there is a certain issue when mortals find out about the mythos, which is a little complicated, especially given that of the real god Mars or any of the real Roman gods, because now any demigods are actually demigods of the mythos gods, not the Roman gods, which is, it's a little complicated, but I can explain if you would like.
Oh yeah, go ahead. It's better for everyone.
So the Roman gods, the Greek gods, the Norse gods, the Aztec gods, the Mayan gods, the Shinto gods, these all used to be real entities that were brought about by faith of humanity.
Sure.
So humans have the ability to believe something into reality without knowing it. Like, the thing is, like, if they know they can do it, it no longer works. It is, if you've ever heard of Warhammer 40k,
Yeah.
if you know anything about the orcs from Warhammer 40k, believe it or not, humans actually kind of have that ability, but it's not on an individual level, it's on a mass level. Right?
Yeah, okay, just so that everyone knows, like the chat, the orcs are essentially, they just believe in something so hard it works.
Yes, if they believe it's true, it is true. So humans have that ability, just not on an individual level, it's on a mass level.
Okay.
So Roman gods used to be real. Like the Roman gods, Mars, Jupiter, Vulcan, they all used to be real entities.
Yeah.
They no longer are, because they no longer have the belief in them enough to maintain them. Same thing with all the old pantheons, right? They all used to be real, but they no longer are.
Sure.
That's because of the belief in them. I am the last demigod that I know of. There could be other ones lurking out there from these true, like what I refer to as true demigods, could still be out there lurking.
Not including the Dionysus guy, right?
No, so he's actually not a true demigod. The Dionysus guy is actually what I refer to as mythos demigods. So the way that it works is that you have faith and you have mythos.
Sure.
Faith is when a human, well, specifically a large gathering of humans, truly believe in something and worship it.
Okay.
Right? That's what creates faith. Faith can congeal into these actual deities, right? These deities are not bound by anything that we know of, right? As long as they have faith in them, they are infinitely powerful, right?
Okay.
So the original Augustus, was a son of the true Mars, the original Mars. And because of my curse, even though there is no longer a true Mars, because there's not enough faith in the original Mars to maintain him as a faith deity, there is now the Mythos Mars. So the way Mythos works is that if humans do not believe in something, but still study and have interest in it, it creates mythos. This mythos congeals over time into whatever was being studied to create them, right? And they are actually shifted and molded by popular belief in, or popular like understandings of those creatures, right?
Okay.
So funny enough, like how much do you know about the Greek god Zeus? Like the original actual Greek god Zeus?
Besides, he's a head honcho, killed his dad, has a lot of sex. That's about it.
So you kind of hitting on the right places right there, right? So he was a hothead. He was a degenerate.
Yeah.
I mean, he. So, like I said before, one of my favorite curses is goose fucking on Olympus, because that's actually a reference to a time where he turned into a goose and raped a woman.
Yeah.
And Jupiter really hates me bringing that up. It's not one of his proudest moments. But that being the case, right? So specifically and you have to understand, like, the Greek gods and the Roman gods are completely separate. They are two different entities.
Okay.
However, they do share a lot of commonality between the two, and they hate that. In fact, all Roman gods hate all Greek gods, and vice versa, except for Bacchus and Dionysus actually are really great drinking buddies. Those two actually love hanging out. Besides those two, they all hate each other. My father, Mars, absolutely fucking hates Ares. But Zeus, as a popular figure, or as the true Zeus, was a lecherous old man who had anger issues, was very self-centered. He was essentially all the negative stereotypes of a king come to life, right?
For reference, watch God of War. Play God of War.
so God of War. So this actually, you're bringing up a great point. God of War depicts Zeus as he really is.
Yeah.
How the original Zeus really was. But there for a time period, because of the movie Hercules by the Disney company,
they kind of like
the perception of who Zeus was dramatically changed from that, right? So the way that Mythos works is it's whatever is in the zeitgeist of popularity, right?
Okay.
So because most people viewed Zeus with that mentality there for a while, the Mythos Zeus became more like that Disney representation of Zeus than his real self.
Okay, that's interesting.
Right. So it's weird in the sense that Mythos gods are heavily impacted by these things, right? So Thor, for instance, in all actuality, Thor, the original Thor, the one that the original Augustus actually ran up against on occasion, or not the original Augustus, sorry, it was many incarnations later, but the Thor, the actual legitimate Thor, he had, like, if you've ever seen like the Iron Man World's Strongest Man competitions,
sure,
like none of them are like bodybuilders. They all look like they're nothing but, like, you know, big chubby guys. In fact, they're just like rippling muscle underneath like a little layer of fat, right?
Yeah,
that's what he looked like. He had a big.
So Thor Ragnarok. I mean, sorry, not Thor. Sorry, God of War Ragnarok, that's it.
Yes, exactly. That's what the real Thor looked closer to, right?
It makes sense, though.
Right, but starting back in the 70s, where Marvel Comics made the Thor character, his hair started turning more and more blonde over time until finally, in about the early 80s, Thor became blonde. The Mythos Thor became blonde, which is totally in opposition to his original godhood, right? The actual faith, the true Thor. So you get these like interesting chimeras of the original interpretation and the popular, incarnation becoming what the mythos looks like. So mythos is created when humans are interested in and study something that they don't truly believe in, right? For those entities to become mythos gods, there had to be a original, true, believed in version of that. So you don't have like beholders or Vecnas or any of the D&D stuff. You don't have those running around in the mythos, right?
Okay.
Because they were never truly believed in. But we do have vampires, because vampires were actually believed in medieval times. People actually did believe in vampires. So now we do have vampires running around that are mythos creations of vampires.
Okay.
Which leads to, and the thing is, like, we don't have perfect knowledge. Like, the Mythos Hunters don't fully understand everything about the mythos. We're doing our best to study it, to better understand it, so we can better combat the monsters. But, like, unfortunately, since we don't have perfect knowledge of it, there's some guesswork there, right? That we have to just assume, like, okay, we believe this is how it works, and to our knowledge, this is what makes it this way. And we've been studying, like, the Mythos Hunters have been, as an organization, have been around since the late 1700s.
Sure.
They were founded around the same time that America, like close to the Revolutionary War, was when the Mythos Hunters became an organization. They started out in Europe, and then they across the entire world. And they don't deal with faith at all. They only deal with matters of the mythos. And so, like, my current job is hunting down monsters for the Mythos Hunters, meaning that I specifically hunt mythos monsters, not faith monsters, which can be
Confusing.
interesting at times.
But yeah, I get it.
Well, so interesting enough, right? So for what we call mundanes,
Yeah.
are humans that are not aware of the mythos, so they cannot be aware of these monsters running around them. They will perceive anything that the mythos creatures do as essentially like freak accidents, or as oh, a sewer line blew up or whatever, right? In all actuality, it will be one of these mythos monsters running around and making havoc, but they can't perceive those because they don't know what the problem is once you know about the mythos, once you know what it is and you perceive it, you no longer create mythos yourself, because it's only through not believing in something, it's through being interested in not believing in something that creates mythos. So, do you know what the term broken masquerade means? Have you ever heard the term broken masquerade before?
No, can you explain it to me?
So, a broken masquerade, it started out being used in vampire fiction, in reference to, like, we can never let the mortals, the humans, know that we're real. But in popular, culture now, it's used by like the SCP Foundation, like
yes. Okay, I see.
To say like, hey, we can't let people know that these things are
Exist.
real.
Yeah.
But the broken masquerade just essentially means that like you have to maintain belief that these things aren't real.
Okay.
For the Mythos Hunters, we have to maintain the masquerade, because at the point if people found out that mythos was real, they would stop creating mythos, and that would destroy all the mythos gods, all the monsters. Me as a demigod, because I'm a true son of Mars, I could still be harmed by the loss of mythos, but I would probably survive it. But,
Okay.
like, for instance, that Dionysus demigod I was telling you about,
Sure.
if the mythos masquerade was actually lost, he would just evaporate, and he would no longer be there. He would no longer be a real person. So the Mythos Hunters, the reason they told me like, nah, don't
Explain.
stream, is they were like, hey, you have the potential of breaking the masquerade, and it's only because of VTubing and me being able to be a VTuber and use that level of disconnect from reality that I'm able to stream. Because people see this as an avatar and they're like, oh, there's no way he has a metal arm. There's no way that, these things are real. I can maintain the masquerade while still being true to myself.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you're working. Okay, I'm just gonna like explain this in like other terms. Like you are working for what's essentially like the SCP Foundation, right? Like as
sort of. There's a little bit of difference between us and this, like what people
perceive as
made up the SCP.
Yeah.
But funny enough, some of the stuff in the SCP Foundation actually are because of the Mythos Hunters.
Yeah.
Because of people were like, oh, this would be really interesting if it was true, and we're like, oh shit, that's really close to the truth. That's not good. So whereas the SCP Foundation, right, they do like the secure, contain, protect.
Yeah.
Where they will like try to capture these entities and hold them. We just go out and we kill the monsters, because by destroying them, we return their essence to mythos again, and that is it can be used in other ways by other mythos creatures. But we also have the ability for like sentient monsters. So we have what's referred to sentient monsters and feral monsters. Sentient monsters are actually
walking, talking.
Enough. Yeah, they can actually agree to, one, uphold the masquerade, but also two, not hurt normal humans, right?
Okay.
And thus, like, as long as they uphold that, they are allowed to live and stay as they are. But if they ever turn feral, like if they either don't consume enough mythos to maintain their sentience, or if they just kind of let go of themselves, we at that point have to put them down. We have to kill them, which has led to some very unfortunate situations. Specifically, in my 1920s iteration, I don't want to give away any details because I am actually writing a memoir of sorts, I guess.
Okay.
Backdating, but there was a situation there, and yeah, that's a whole another situation. But either way, so like there are sentient monsters that can essentially agree to uphold the masquerade, not hurt humans,
Yeah.
and maintain themselves. And we will allow them to, register underneath the Mythos Hunters as a viable living or a viable safe entity, and we won't hunt them. That we allow them to live their own lives to be safe and so on and so forth. But we do hunt feral monsters constantly because we have to keep those others. We have to keep humans safe.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
And so like it's weird because the more people don't believe in these old deities but keep studying them, like in recent pop culture, people have been generating more and more mythos because back 200 years ago, people didn't have the free time to really study and care about these things as much, right?
Yeah.
They were too concerned about farming or whatever they
Surviving.
needed to just surviving, right? Exactly. So that being the case, because they weren't really they didn't have the free time to do these things, it left that's the reason the Mythos Hunters only really became a thing about 300 years ago, right?
Okay.
Because up until that point, no one really had the free time to. Well, actually, it was about 200 and some change ago. Up to that point, Mythos wasn't even really a concern because people were too busy. And the Mythos Hunters started in Europe because Europe was the first country to really have so much free time for the average person that they started, creating mythos of their own. And it kind of spread from there. And now America is one of the largest centers for mythos issues because these mythological things are so prevalent in our pop culture that we're seeing more and more issues. So the Mythos Hunters are becoming more and more taxed on a daily basis. And it's becoming harder and harder for us to maintain the masquerade, but we do what we have to do, right?
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense, considering that there is just so much things that people just start believing in. One of the things that I've seen a couple years back was there is the daughter of Persephone and Hades, who is supposedly the goddess of, I think, poisons, despair, something like that, only to find out that that is not an actual deity from historical from historical knowledge. It's just something that came out from the website Tumblr.
Yep.
But
so interesting
yeah,
enough, right? That is actually, so you bring up a very good thing because people ask me sometimes oh, Kratos, what about Kratos?
yeah,
Kratos was not a mythological figure, and thus he does not appear. And the same thing with her, right? Because there was never a real belief in her. There's only this popular understanding of her. She would not actually appear from mythos, right?
yeah.
As far as we observe. So even though we have these fictional things that take inspiration from deities, because of the involvement of Hades and Persephone, those two are going to be that portion of the backstory will generate mythos, right? Because they are involved in her story. She herself would never actually manifest within the mythos.
That's understandable. So, just thinking about it, you said that the way, of course, things, people, or the gods have been changing slowly because of popular belief. Does it mean that the Roman goddess of the hunt, Diana, has been slowly been turned into Wonder Woman?
Yeah, exactly. So, so the way that, so there are the faith gods. So like I said, as far as I know, there could be some other immortal demigods running around right now
Yeah.
that I'm just not aware of. But I'm kind of the last of the true demigods. Even though I'm in a weird place, right? My spirit, my soul, is a true demigod soul because of the original Augustus. My
Yeah.
body, however, is made up from human and mythos god DNA, meaning that I'm in this weird position where I both am attuned to faith and mythos both, and it's not a good thing. It's actually a very bad thing for me, because it makes it where if there was a broken masquerade, I don't know what would actually happen to me. I don't know what would occur to my body or my soul. So there is the original Roman deity would not be affected by pop culture, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, let's go back to Thor. Thor is a really easy example to use here, right?
Yeah, because everyone kind of knows him.
Right. So the original Thor was never affected by how humans perceived him, right? He was Thor, and nothing humans did, regardless of what they believed in him, he was a concrete being. But once people shifted away from those beliefs and started believing in, so right now, let me stick with Thor and I'll go to the other beliefs here in a second. When Thor became no longer believed in, but people were still interested in him, right?
Yeah.
That created a separate entity from the faith Thor, which is the mythos Thor. That mythos Thor is not solid. He is very pliable and changes based off of popular belief and culture, right?
Okay.
So he looks a lot more like Chris
Hemsworth
than than the actual Thor does, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And that change is not instant by any measures, but it's pretty fast, right? So like whenever you had chubby Thor coming out of the MCU movies, we all could watch as Thor became chubbier and chubbier, and he was not happy about it. And that's one of the things, like, they literally can't do anything about it, right? The humans, if that's what they see them as, that's what they see them as. So it's really funny to see this, like, peak, masculine figure start to wear away into like this chubbier and chubbier version over the span of a couple months. It was something to behold. And that's another thing. Like I don't rub elbows with gods on a regular basis, right?
Yeah.
But I do see them on a fairly common basis. I will get to see other deities because I, as a Mythos hunter, am having to go behind them in a lot of ways and clean up behind them, right?
Yeah.
But to go back to the what I was about to say, people have asked me, well, why isn't Hinduism part of the mythos? It's because Hinduism is still a widely believed in faith, right?
Yeah.
There are still a large sect of humanity that practices and believes in Hinduism, which means that any mythos that is created by people who are non-believers of Hinduism is actually like, it's kind of like antimatter and matter, right? You can think of mythos and faith in those two terms, right? If there's about an equal amount of belief and non-belief, it will cancel each other out. And in all actuality, faith is so much stronger than mythos that a small sect of believers can completely destroy a large sect of non-believers. What they can create as mythos.
Okay, I think it makes sense. I think I'm starting to get it.
Yeah, so Hinduism, even if there was only, let's say, 10,000 people who truly believed in Hinduism, that 10,000 would be enough to completely eradicate any amount of mythos, the rest of the world would be able to. Well, I would say probably more. I would say 100,000. So if there's like 100,000 people who believed in Hinduism, that would be enough to destroy any amount of mythos the rest of the world would be able to create to fuel that mythology becoming part of the mythos, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing with like Christianity, Judaism, any of those faiths will not be able to form in the mythos because they are still practiced and believed in reality.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Also, it you know, from a outside perspective, it keeps me from stepping on anyone's toes. But anyway,
It's fine. It's fine. Dang, that was a lot of explanation for like question number 2.
no,
No, it's fine. That's fine. Surely a lot more people who are watching, of course, and future watchers of the videos would understand your lore a lot better now. Like know about your history, I mean, and the world of Mythos Hunters.
Mhm.
Okay. Anyway, moving on to the next question. So, the you said previously that the others are a type of celestial being, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about your other interactions with them in the past thousands of years?
Yeah, sure. So interestingly enough, others are what the Mythos Hunters refer to as any being that is made up or partially made up of mythos, right? So I would be considered an other because of being a demigod.
Yeah.
There are Mythos Hunters that are not others. They are practitioners. So they are just humans that have an understanding of mythos and can use it to their own effect without actually being tied physically to the mythos itself. Others are something that largely started coming about and being a huge force about 250 years ago. And something that's where the Mythos Hunters became a thing. So let's go back to Thor again, because Thor is the easiest one to pinpoint.
Sure.
So Thor as an entity, as an other, started developing around about 200 years ago, because it took enough time for the mythos to saturate and form around that figure for it to become the true, like the mythos form of that deity. So one of the issues that we have to be very careful with as Mythos Hunters is that we have to understand that these others are, while they might be figments of people's like they come from the mythos, they are still sentient, right?
Yeah.
Some of them are still sentient, and we don't fully understand souls enough to know if they create souls from themselves, right? And that's where it's like I am a byproduct of not only faith but of mythos as well. Like I know I have a soul because one, I'm a human,
sure.
Right? But two, I have a soul that's been passed down through multiple incarnations. Other demigods, I can very easily say they have a soul, right? Because they're half human, right? So at the very least, they have a soul from being that. But like, what about a fully formed vampire from the mythos? Like, if the mythos produces a vampire, does that vampire have a soul? I don't know. I can't say that, right? And so there's a big portion of the Mythos Hunters that is trying to figure out what constitutes a soul. Like, what makes a soul? Can a being of mythos generate its own soul? And it's one of the things that are kind of, we're trying to figure out. Currently, we're trying to figure out if that's the case, but we don't know yet.
Fair enough.
So as far as others go, we study them, we try to understand them better, and as of right now, we don't know if when we kill one, it leaves behind a soul or not. We do know that there is an underworld, and like there is a Hades, a mythos Hades, and we do know that That's where like demigods or anyone that is a practitioner, anyone who believes, like that's where they will go. So like if you were like, let's say you believed in true Greek mythology, right?
Mhm.
Let's say that that's what you believed in, and you died, you would go to the Mythos Hades.
Okay.
You know, we have seen souls down there from people who did not know the mythos was real, but they believed in it. So like all the people that used to go to the Faith Hades are now like, we don't know if the Faith Hades is even real anymore. What we do know is all the souls that were in Faith Hades are now in the Mythos Hades.
So they
So
moved
we
from
don't
to a
know.
different dimension, essentially.
Essentially, yeah, and we don't know when that occurred. We don't like. There's no way for us to pinpoint. But at some point, when there was not enough faith, but there was enough mythos, that's when the occurrence occurred. Because for all intents and purposes, we can see and we know for sure that the mythos underworld has been around longer than the mythos on Earth has. And we don't understand necessarily why that transition occurred or why that transition occurred.
Okay, that, yeah, just it's something that has happened because of how people have perceived it. I would suppose one example would be like maybe when this, and again, Disney like released freaking Hercules, yes. People just started thinking that Hades was essentially just a swirling pool of wailing souls.
Yep. And so interestingly enough, and this is one of the things we don't understand, while the deities themselves will change to match popular appearance, the actual Hades did not change. Like the location of Hades did not change to match that popular, and we don't understand why. We think it's because of the involvement of souls, because the souls are there for solidity, like it makes it more solid.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that the Mythos Hunters are trying to study and understand better, is what gives it its concrete, form. Because in all actuality, if we can figure out what causes that and we can apply it to the mythos, like the sentient mythos creatures, and allow them to become more concrete, we don't have to worry about a broken masquerade killing off all mythos creatures. Because if at any point the world found out that mythos was real, it would literally, as soon as it became known to be real, it would destroy all those creatures and all those beings. And that would be considered like a huge disaster.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you're essentially committing belief genocide. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just something that the Mythos Hunters have to watch out for, considering that the ramifications of the belief system is a lot harder to control, I suppose.
Yes.
Because if you compare it to like using a nuke can be stopped by blowing up its delivery device, or like preventing it from being launched in the first place, or like stops.
Also, that's localized, right? Like,
yeah, it's localized.
Yeah, no, if we break the masquerade, that literally, it wipes out all mythos creatures instantly. Whether they are sentient or not, they will just disappear, and that is a lot of concern. That is a lot to worry about.
Yeah, it sounds like something that would just disrupt. Well, of course, kill off. Like, it's fucking terrible.
Yeah,
it's essentially like world ending in terms of the mythos world, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just kind of scary. It's kind of scary, like for all like things we can say. It's just terrifying.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Like the Mythos Hunters, I don't know if they envy me or if they're afraid of me necessarily in a lot of ways. Like the higher ups, because I am in a very unique situation.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it where they have no clue what to do with me, because I keep coming back. So while they were founded in the late 1700s, There has been multiple incarnations of Augustus that have served the Mythos Hunters.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, do we give him his previous rank? Like, he's obviously not, like, he's not as
He's not the
like,
same
last
guy,
time he was
technically
here.
speaking, but
Yeah, but then I know, like, I will have flashes and memories of classified documentation that I shouldn't have access to. And they're like, well, okay, so if he knows the secrets already, at that point, so it's like, I promote faster and faster every time I come back. Like, right now, I'm a senior hunter.
Yeah.
That's my current rank. So being a senior hunter normally takes about 15 to 20 years of proven huntsman experience to reach that. My current iteration made it in 5 years, which is, simply not heard of anywhere else. And so there are older, more experienced, quote unquote, more experienced hunters that serve under me who are not very happy with that situation, right? So I have to deal with that on a regular basis, and I have to put them in their place and say, like, look, I understand that you are, 35 years old and you've been part of the Mythos Hunters for 15 years. Tough shit.
I'm literally a god.
Demigod,
I suppose.
Demigods.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Demigods that are like they're like, I'm a son of Zeus. Why should I have to listen to this like upstart son of Mars? Blah blah blah. And it's like I will literally have to put them in their place and be like, you don't know anything. Like I was walking with the Mythos Hunters whenever there was 12 members, which is that's
like
the
the startup
Mythos
essentially.
One of my incarnations was one of the original founders of the Mythos.
That's about right.
And so like they were like, well, that wasn't you. I'm like, well, I have memories of it. So if I have memories of it, does that not count? Just because
that's a whole philosophy thing at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, there's always this pushback. And so like there are so about the SCPI founder, the 06, right?
Sure.
There's not like an 06 necessarily of the Mythos.
Yes.
But there are some of the directors that are immortals.
Yeah.
For lack of better terminology, they're immortal. And so like they knew the original Augustus. And so for them, looking at me is like, he looks a little different, because like every incarnation looks a little different, right?
Yeah.
There are some like key factors that remain the same. Like typically I'll either have red hair or red tones to my hair, or I might have freckles or whatever, because my mother's always of Gaelic descendancy. But like because like the original Augustus, he was a son of the real Mars. He had some very concrete things that sort of pass on to every generation. But now, because the mythos changes around Mars, now my father could be in multiple different fluctuating states whenever I'm conceived, and thus my appearance will change
accordingly
on that.
Yeah.
Right. So like if I were to die today, I have no idea what the current my next incarnation would even look like, because of the god of war, and people so tightly like place Ares and Mars like next to each other, even though they're drastically different characters, because they're like so tightly like in the popular culture. I would probably look closer like to the god of war depiction of Ares than the true Mars did, right? So
yeah, I can see that happening, like you essentially being the person who you're this is a very, very weird way to put it, but do you know the story of One Punch Man?
I do. I like One Punch Man a lot.
Okay, cool. Because in the story of One Punch Man, Saitama, he is essentially the reason why the Hero Association was created, right? Because he
didn't know that. I've kept up with the manga. I haven't read the webcomic yet. So that's interesting. That makes sense though.
It was it's not, I don't think it's actually confirmed yet, but it's essentially confirmed because the butt chin kid that he that he saved is
I
actually
know who you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah.
So yes, yeah. I follow. Yeah. That makes sense.
He's
I follow.
for
I don't know if you've read the current. Are you current on the manga?
hell no. I'm waiting for it to get
okay.
animated.
Okay, so in the manga, he like literally the last chapter of the manga that just released.
Spoiler, do not say it, please.
I'm not gonna say it. He did something where what you just said could be like, oh, okay.
Okay, fair enough.
So like that's when I was like, oh shit, he might be talking about the webcomic stuff. But yeah, no, yeah, you're actually that's actually a very valid. In some ways, I am the reason that there is a Mythos Hunters.
Yeah.
But also in some ways, I'm both older and younger than the Mythos Hunters themselves. So, and there was like this weird time period, right, between the original Augustus and that 1700s Augustus. Mm-hmm. There's this weird time period where how superhuman I was in fluctuation. Because I don't know how much you know about the Roman Empire and the belief in the Roman gods, but there was actually like pockets of true believers in Roman gods, and so like I could years where my demigod side was much more powerful, and then there was times where it was very weak, and I was at like my lowest point before the like in the late 1600s was probably the weakest incarnations of Augustus, where he was barely better than a peak performance human, so to speak. He was still above peak performance human, but barely. But if you compare that to like the original armies by himself, and you compare those two, and it's just like, yeah, they're not the same, bro.
So I'm just imagining like, okay, let's do a hypothetical here. There is there's like a true immortal. I'm using air quotes over true immortal who like has been alive since the Mythos Hunters has been created. He's just gonna see you like you just absolutely like peak human physique, like start like creating the Mythos Hunters, and then like 50 years later, the next Augustus arrives. He's gonna be like weaker, like what the fuck happened?
Yeah, so actually, so funny enough, right? So let's Cain and Abel, right?
Yeah, sure.
From
SCP?
Christianity.
Oh, so okay, actual Cain and Abel. Okay.
Yeah, the actual Cain and Abel, right?
Yeah.
So, excuse me.
Let's go.
So, Cain was cursed to walk Earth for all time, right?
Yeah.
So theoretically, and I can't say this, I've never met Cain. But theoretically, there should be a Cain walking around on Earth right now. He would have seen the original Augustus.
Yeah.
He would have seen, and this is another thing where, like, if you want to talk about the strength difference between faith and mythos, faith, because of how powerful Christianity is right now, as far as a faith goes, it can actually retroactively create things in the past. So
what do you mean?
There is a Cain walking around right now.
Okay.
Even though whenever humans became a thing, like Christianity wasn't a thing, it has retroactively made a Cain that has been walking around since the dawn of human.
Okay.
Mythos cannot affect the past like that. Faith can. And that's kind of a crazy concept, right? And that's one of the reasons that the Mythos Hunters are so afraid of me, because I still have a faith presence and a mythos presence. And they're like, what if one day Augustus becomes more faith powered
than mythos powered, and he can just like okay.
So that being said, right? So like there's a Cain that's been walking around. So he could have seen the first Augustus, my literal most powerful incarnation, who was able to fight off like hordes of people by himself, right? He could have seen that. And then he could have seen the 1600s Augustus that was barely better than human. Like barely better than peak performance human, right? He could fight 10 men off by himself. But really, if you compare like a person who could literally one man, an army versus a man who can take on 10 men, those are not really comparable, right? And as of right now, I am more powerful. My demigod side is more powerful right now than any of my previous Mythos Hunter incarnations. I am stronger now than I have ever been as a Mythos Hunter, because popular culture, there's so many more humans on Earth.
Yeah.
They are creating so much more mythos on Earth. Like, the Greek and Roman pantheons have become more prevalent in current history than they ever were in the past. So, like, there's all of these, like, combining factors that right now, as far as Mythos Hunters go, I am stronger than I ever have as any previous Mythos Hunter Augustus had. And that's one of the things, like, some of the, immortal, quote unquote, immortal members of the Mythos Hunters have seen that every incarnation of Augustus keeps getting more powerful, and they're like, oh no, this is not a good trend. Because one of the things that the Mythos, and this is something I'm aware of as a Mythos Hunter, is like, we always have to be wary, and we always have to be on the watch out for the future of the mythos, right? And because mythos keeps getting more powerful, the monsters keep getting more powerful, the practitioners keep getting more powerful, there's an upper limit. Like, once they get so powerful, it's going to be impossible to maintain the masquerade.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the monsters that show up and devastate, like, blocks of a human city, and it gets written off as like, oh, it was a terrorist bombing, or it was a sewer line blowing up, or whatever. People are going to start saying, like, wait a second, this isn't adding up. Like, some of this isn't, like, one person saying, like, they saw an explosion, but another person saying they thought they saw a snake rolling around inside of the smoke.
Yeah.
And now it's not one crazy person who says they saw that. Now it's like 10 people saying, I'm pretty sure I saw a giant snake in the smoke. Yeah, I think I saw that too. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Because some people, while they're not aware of the mythos, they're borderline aware, and they start seeing things. And we're constantly combing insane asylums, because that's where we get a lot of our new recruits into the Mythos Hunters for practitioners, because practitioners look like they're just fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Before they become fully awake, because it's like they are on the verge of becoming self-aware. And so we will go to an insane asylum and be like, oh, we're transferring this person to another insane asylum for better treatment. We will transfer them actually into Mythos Hunter care. We will break the masquerade to them, make them aware, and that helps. They're like, oh shit, I'm not just seeing things. There really are monsters in the mist, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And then we can, like, rehabilitate them and get them back into functioning members of society, and then they become Mythos Hunters as practitioners.
Okay. Are these practitioners also taking up a military role, or is that only for demigods?
No, so yes, there are actually not that many demigods in the ranks of the Mythos Hunters. We are not necessarily rare, but we're not common either. So right now, I'm the only son of Mars in the Mythos Hunters, though there was one. Well, he wasn't in the Mythos Hunters, but there was another son of Mars in World War II that I had to deal with, which, again, I had to fight a family member on the Nazi side of things is not a good thing, which shows you, like, that's kind of one of the downsides, right? Is like, I know that there are incarnations of Augustus that were on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. But at least I can say I was on the Nazi side. I do have a half brother who was on the Nazi side, and I had to handle him personally. And that was an interesting philosophical debate back and forth, because I don't know if you know about what the Nazis believed in, but they believed they were the Third Reich, which has to do with Roman history.
Yeah.
So it's like, he really thought it was like, as a son of Mars, I have to be on this side. It's not like, even if I disagree with what they're doing, this is the side of Rome, and I'm had to be like, yeah, but no, you don't have to do that, my guy. Please, it's not too late. And he was definitely of the mindset of, yes, it's too late for me to go. Like, we had like that light side, dark side. It's not too late to turn back, and no, it is too late for me. Conversation, but that's not here nor there.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of demigods roaming around, and most gods only have like one, at most two people or demigods running around at the same time.
Yeah.
Even Zeus and Jupiter, as lecherous as they are, only have like one or two scions running around in the Mythos Hunters. The majority of our ranks are either practitioners or blessed or cursed, which are two different ways that people become aware of the mythos. They become awakened.
I suppose we still haven't discussed that yet. So can you explain like what are the blessed and the cursed?
So yeah, the blessed and cursed are both types of humans that are able to interact with the mythos. And practitioners, like all three of those are people that can interact with the mythos. They are aware of them, they are awakened, and they can interact and do things within the mythos, but how they reach that awakened state is different. Let's start with the blessed. So blessed means that someone was approached by a mythos being and offered a deal or a trade of some sort. Give me a benevolent mythological creature.
Benevolent mythological creature.
Can be from any mythology.
I'm thinking about everything. Everything I think of is like kind of evil.
Well, so okay, that's fine. Give me one of the evil ones.
Okay, let's say a siren.
A siren, right? So a siren. So if a mythos created siren became sentient enough, right? They could approach a mortal and say, "Mortal, I will give you my power. In exchange, you are going to be bound to me, so that as long as you live and I live, the other one can't be killed." Right?
Okay.
And if one of us die, the other one will die too. Right? What this does is, at the point where the siren is offering this power, it's up to the human to say yes or no.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But like the siren can say, if you say no, I'm going to kill you. Like literally, they can coerce you into this situation.
That's pretty much extortion.
It is, right? But as long as the person, the human, has a choice, even if it's like a really bad choice, that is still a choice, right?
Yeah.
That would make them blessed. They are not cursed. At that point, they are blessed. Blessed people gain some token of power or token of ability from the deal that they make with the other, right? So, for instance, the siren will say, they could approach like a pop star, right? And say, "I will give you the power of my siren song in exchange for if I die, you die, if you die, I die," right? And it extends our mutual livelihood, right? Livelihood to living. Because the mythos creature, since it's sentient, it's already received its token from, or its registration from the Mythos Hunters. It's no longer having to worry about being hunted. Now what it has to worry about is a broken masquerade situation, or it starving to death because of the lack of mythos in its area or something like that, right? Which most mythological creatures, if they start starving on mythos, if they're sentient, they will go feral and they will be hunted at that point. So like the Mythos Hunters does its best to make sure to relocate them and keep them where they're going to have enough mythos to maintain their sanity. But that's not here nor there. So the pop star can agree to this, right? And that pop star now will become a Billboard Top 100 artist. They'll have like this big pop-off song that makes them famous, right?
Yeah.
So they are blessed at that point, right? They have a blessing from a mythos creature. Versus a curse is when the human had no free will or free choice in the matter. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, right? It could be like you were beheaded and the Dullahan from Celtic mythos came to you and brought you back to life and saved your life. You are only alive because the Dullahan
allows it.
Possessed you,
okay,
essentially. But you're still cursed because you did not have the ability to say yes or no, right? There was no choice there.
Okay.
It was forced upon you. Now, there are some key differences between blessed and cursed because of that degree of
choice.
choice, right? Typically speaking, a blessed is proportionally powerful as the bond they have with their mythological creature, right? Whereas a cursed is only ever as powerful as the entity that cursed them, right? So whereas going back to the pop star, the more tightly bound to their blesser, the more powerful their link is. So like that can fluctuate, right? Let's say that the siren says, okay, I'm gonna become your manager because that's what my day job is going to be, and like as a manager they're doing a good job, and their relationship grows with the pop star. But then they make a couple bad business decisions, and then like the pop star starts getting mad at them, so that weakens their power, right?
Okay.
It fluctuates. Versus the Dullahan, the Dullahan cursed person, the Dullahan gets more and more powerful because, like, let's say the Sleepy Hollow movie comes out, so the mythos of the Dullahan becomes more prevalent in pop culture. So the Dullahan's going to grow in power, thus able to the person who's cursed by the Dullahan will perpetually become more powerful, even if they have zero relation with the Dullahan. As long as the Dullahan's getting more powerful, they're also getting more powerful. But then the Dullahan starts getting weaker, they will become weaker as well, right? So that's like the differentiator between a blessed and a cursed, is one's for choice, and that's based off your relationship with the creature. One has no choice, and it's only based on the creature's power. Then you have practitioners, who are humans who became aware of the mythos through rigorous study, or they saw one too many mythos disasters and they started seeing through the mythos, through the fog of the mythos, and seeing what was really happening. And so a lot of times they will be written off as crazy people because they're like, no, there was a giant snake in the smoke, I saw it, and I could hear it whispering in my ears, and like, all right, dude's obviously got some kind of psychosis. They get checked into a mental asylum, right? A lot of times it doesn't always occur like that. There are people who are able to, like, I'm going to sound crazy if I talk about this, and they start studying in secret and start trying to figure out stuff in secret. So like they even hide it from their loved ones or whatever. But either way, practitioners gain their abilities through study and understanding of the mythos, and using the mythos to fuel their abilities. While voodoo, for instance, is not one of the most they don't have their own, like, there's a quote unquote pantheon of voodoo spirits, like the Baron Simity, right? While they have their quote unquote own pantheon, there is no pantheon of the voodoo gods in the mythos, right? It has not gained enough of a seeding of power to make its way into the pantheons. Right now, the pantheons are Norse, Greek, Roman, Aztec, Shinto, and
Egyptian.
Who am I forgetting? Egyptian. Those are the 6 right now. Those are the 6 pantheons where they have actually developed enough power to have a godly realm, which godly realms and underworld realms exist independently of our reality. But that's where the mythos gods and the mythos, the dead, the spirits and souls go away from our current reality. I don't want to say it's a different dimension, because dimension carries kind of a weird connotation. It's more along the lines of a different reality altogether. But a practitioner will, study and understand these things to the point where they are able to interact with the mythos and change things accordingly.
Okay, I see. I was actually curious when you were like signing off on the different mythologies. Does this also include like Chinese mythology?
So right, so that's a very interesting point. The thing is that in a lot of rural areas in China, the Chinese mythologies, Taoism, things like that, are still believed in enough to cancel out any creation of mythos.
Ah, so you haven't met someone that's like Sun Wukong?
No. So interestingly enough, correction. I've never met a mythos being of Sun Wukong. Interestingly enough, you know how I was saying earlier how one of my incarnations, I'm not like solid on a lot of the history for him,
Sure.
but I do remember fighting in China as a European,
Yeah.
individual fighting in the Chinese War. I'm fairly certain he actually met Sun Wukong because
Ah.
again,
Okay.
faith is so powerful that it can retroactively make things occur. And Sun Wukong is immortal,
Yeah.
does interact with the mortal realm, and so I'm again not 100% certain, but I'm fairly certain one of my previous incarnations, one of my faith incarnations, actually met Sun Wukong, and interacted with them. How much I cannot say because I do not have full memories of that time. But to answer your question, right now there is still enough practice and belief in Chinese mysticism that it has not allowed a mythos presence to occur.
Okay, I see. That makes sense.
Same thing with like Hinduism, Buddhism, which that's I do not see a way in the immediate future, at least, that Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, or Hinduism to ever become non-believed in enough for them to develop a mythos presence. That being said, Chinese mysticism is one of them that is borderline right now because while there is some active practitioners or active believers, I should say, I need not to use practitioner because that is a key word in the Mythos Hunters.
Yeah.
While there are believers in Chinese mysticism right now, I don't know enough about those demographics to say like, oh, the Chinese will never develop. But I will say that as soon as they do develop into the Mythos Hunters, like once they develop a Mythos presence, I believe that they will become so powerful so quickly that they will get their own godly realm. Just because of how prevalent the Chinese mysticism is involved, especially in Asian media and Asian cultures, as a form of like either entertainment or pop culture is so prevalent there that I do believe that if they ever cross that threshold where it'll be almost instant that they'll probably become part of the godly realm and start developing demigods actively. And also, I should clarify some. Well, I don't know. Do you have any questions about how people become demigods or what demigods are?
I didn't have a question about that, but I do have a question regarding something else.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
You said that the Chinese mythology isn't. It still has some true believers, which is why the reason why you haven't actually had a interactions with Sun Wukong modern day. I'm saying, of course.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't think this should apply to something like Shintoism, considering that Shintoism actually does have a big belief population people believing in it.
So that's interesting. So I do need to clarify something, right? So Shintoism is separate from Japanese spiritualism, right? So currently, and it's called Shintoism still in Japan, but it's different than the Shintoism in the mythos. The mythos is talking about like Izami, oh god, what's the
Izanagi?
Yeah, Izanagi, like, or Susanoo, or like those old world gods of Shintoism, right?
Okay.
Current Japanese spiritualism believes in kami, believes in the spirits, like the spiritual realm, believe in spirits of everyday items, but those aren't the same thing as the quote unquote Shintoism that I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
Okay, that makes some sense.
Right. So like the like rural Japan, rural in the or even in modern Tokyo and stuff, you will have people who are believers in kami, believers in the spiritual. Those people don't necessarily pray to Izami and such. So the it's almost like, and that's one of the most divided and like, I don't know, did you see the map of the godly realms?
Yeah, I was looking at the map.
Yeah, so the reason that the Shinto gods are actually in charge of the Sky Bridge, one, it's part of their mythology, but two, is because out of all of the mythos, they are the ones that are closely tied to a current belief on Earth while still being separated from it, right? And so they are like in this twilight area, which gives them the strongest connection to physical Earth. And that's why all the other pantheons have to go through them to get onto the mortal realm.
Okay, that I suppose that makes sense because one of the things that was surprising to me when I was learning about more of the Japanese mythology is that a lot of people genuinely believe that Amaterasu, the sun goddess of
Mhm.
Japan, is actually directly linked to the current emperor of Japan. Like,
Emperor, yep.
I was
So
surprised
that's
by that. So
yeah. That's so I was too, right? So that again, and when I say like I am the only faith demigod in the Mythos Hunters, that does not mean I'm the only faith demigod. Period.
yeah,
Right? And I cannot say yes or no whether the Emperor of Japan, the current, like, even though they're not ruling, they are
still,
you know,
yeah, a
still
royal
present.
family essentially.
Yeah, essentially, right? They're essentially a figurehead or a figurehead family. I cannot say for certain whether or not they are demigods. What I can say is that they are not linked to um, the Shintoism entity Amaterasu that is currently residing on the Sky Bridge. There is a distinction, and it's weird, right? Because of the pockets of belief
Mhm.
for these individuals. Where how do I word this properly? So when we talk about Thor,
Yeah.
right? There was a Norse belief, singular.
Yeah.
When we talk about Mars or Zeus or Ixolotl, they all had a concrete one. This is our god. Period. Right.
Yeah.
Whereas the beliefs in Shintoism and Japanese were much more segmented, and it's weird because. Okay, let me explain it this way. Do you know what village kami are?
Sorry.
Do you know what village kami are?
No.
So village kami were essentially like every village in rural Japan would have their own guardian god, essentially.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right. So what that did was it made it so segmented in Japan that during the faith periods of Shintoism, there was like 1,000 Amaterasus running around. There was 1,000
That's hilarious.
Izumis. Right. So that in and of itself, and like it was very close to occurring with Norse as well. Norse luckily had a few kings or chieftains that kind of congealed and kept them closely tied together enough that this splintering didn't occur. Shintoism, as far as the Mythos Hunters are aware, is the only one where the splintering occurred that kept them from becoming one centralized belief, right?
Yeah.
There was never like a high preacher or high priest that like kept all the warring tribes of Japan believing in a singular mythal, like a singular religion, so to speak, right? They all kept their own individuals. What this led to is that when a lot of the tribes of Japan, like the warring tribes, warring states, as all of this occurred and stuff, and while a lot of the people still believe that Amaterasu is directly tied to the emperor, they all believe their Amaterasu is tied to the emperor.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's weird in the sense that a lot of, and this is actually, I have to say that like globalism is kind of to blame for this. A lot
Yeah.
of the mythos that is generated for the Shinto deities in mythos actually comes from Western civilizations,
Yeah.
because they are so far divorced and they have no idea that there's such a segmented splintering of Shintoism in Japan. All they know is Shintoism, big capital S Shintoism, one big thing, and so it generates all this mythos for this one big thing. And while these little pockets of faith do wear down and keep them from becoming, because if it wasn't for that, Shintoism would be by and far the most powerful of the mythologies and the mythos, right? Because
Sure.
they're the most prevalent in pop culture, except for possibly Norse now. Norse is probably getting up there in popularity. Greek did have some, late 90s, early 2000s, Greek was getting very powerful. And this is where the fluctuation of the power in mythos is so erratic. It can go up and down so quickly.
Yeah.
But Shintoism specifically has had a very strong, power drawing from the Mythos Hunters, or from the West in the Mythos Hunters estimations, because we can the Mythos Hunters have the ability to kind of map the density of mythos in an area, right?
Okay.
And we use this to be able to know when a new mythos creature is essentially congealing out of the mythos, because we will see a steep decline in a very specific area of mythos, and that means a monster is essentially being formed in that spot because it's absorbing up all the mythos in that area.
Okay.
And then we will send someone to investigate that area and find out, is it sentient, is it feral, is it a danger to the society, do I need to capture it and bring it back to the Mythos Hunters for study? So we'll have field researchers go out, and typically we'll have a hunter, not a senior hunter, just a normal hunter, a field researcher, and a field operations manager, as a 3-man team, go out to these spots and investigate. I've not been part of the field research team in about 6 years, because it's typically seen as one of a lower level hunter positions to be a part of these field research teams, because the likelihood of danger is very low. There's a possibility of danger, but because the forming and you can do that initial research on it, chances are they're not going to be very powerful in that initial stage. So you can go out, investigate. Now, if there's an investigation in a rural area, they might send a more seasoned hunter, because by the time we get there, it might have already gained enough power to be an actual threat. So there's always this you have to make an executive call on who you're going to send, when you're going to send them, how powerful of a hunter do you need to send. But that's all got logistic stuff. That's all behind the scenes shit for the Mythos Hunters to worry about. But with the Mythos Hunters, it is a very interesting. We are studying constantly the splintering of Shintoism and why it has allowed for still such a powerful presence in the mythos, despite still being believed on smaller scales.
That makes sense. There's just way too much volatility with regards to beliefs, because in several belief systems it already has splintered several times. We have several sects of Christianity, for example.
Yeah, so that's actually another really interesting thing, especially because there's a couple of key splinters in Christianity, right? Catholicism or baptism. There are some key splinterings that occurred, but each of those individual sects are still so large. And this is another thing where the population density of Earth has increased so much over the past 2 centuries.
Yeah.
That we're seeing that's right now. I was I don't think there will ever be a Hinduism or Christianity or Judaism occur, because of the population density increasing so much, and it takes such a small amount of true believers to
create something.
To keep from the mythos from occurring, right? So it's this weird, I can never see a situation again where those are going to ever gain enough power or presence to to come forth.
Okay, I see.
So like, and this is another thing. It's like, so there's like, I don't want to say that they are, I guess shades or tints of mythos, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, if someone is studying Roman gods, that will give the mythos a Roman tinge to it, but that it's still just mythos, right? And so a Greek entity or a Shinto entity would still be able to absorb that mythos. These wouldn't get as much out of it as if they were to absorb from their own individual tinge of mythos, right?
Yeah.
So there's this weird situation where people are studying, like agnostic people or just straight up atheist people are studying Christianity, and they will actually generate mythos from it, right?
Yeah.
And even though it is not congealing into, you know, Christianity, and this is another thing where like monotheisms are going to be next to impossible to ever be able to form the mythos, because of the amount of mythos that would have to congeal to form that monotheistic being. It would be absurd. It would take literally no one on earth believing in it and everyone studying it to make this monotheistic mythos being. Just because of the more powerful the being is, the more congealing has to occur. In fact, the mythos gods, like if somehow if a mythos god was ever slayed,
Yeah.
I don't know that it would ever be possible for them to be reincarnated again, because of the sheer, like, there was such a long period of human history where they were not believed in but still like read upon and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very slow. Like the buildup of mythos was very slow, and these things were like congealing into gods before the Mythos Hunters ever became a thing, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, I just I cannot foresee a situation where that would ever be able to occur again, right?
Okay.
That being said, I do think that, like, you know, with Shintoism or like it's so hard to draw a line between, like, why are the pocket ones still destroying mythos even though they're all individual different splinters of Shintoism, right? And it's so weird, and the Mythos Hunters are researching it, but as far as I know, we haven't made any like real advances in that study since World War I, or World War II, I should say, because that really became a big point of contention, because during World War II, unfortunately, there was a bit of an internal schism within the Mythos Hunters between the West and East and West branches of the Mythos Hunters. Luckily, we didn't have any open fighting.
Yeah.
It was more of a
ideological
war, so to speak. Yeah. You know, some of the eastern branches were like, no, we're doing the right thing. No, the Nazis are your fault. Like, you guys would've- yeah, that's kind of like, that's like, there was inner bickering.
Yeah.
But luckily it never boiled over.
Okay.
But yeah, so like we've not made any real advances because that very specific study of why Shintoism being so splintered allowed for the creation of the mythos hasn't really been studied since, because there was a lot of study put into that by the Western branches during World War II, trying to figure out, because unfortunately they were trying to figure out how to essentially abolish the Shintoism out of the mythos. I'm glad that they didn't, because we would be in a very different situation right now if they would have accomplished that. Again, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure Augustus was on the wrong side of history on that one, because he might have been one of them that was part of that branch of the Mythos Hunters.
Trying to abolish it.
Trying to find a way to abolish the Shintoism from the mythos. It was, again, I don't have perfect memories of my time there, but it was something that I am bigly aware that he was trying to accomplish, and I'm not proud of that, but it is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
I guess I should just be like happy that I wasn't on the Nazi side, honestly.
Yeah, that's just as good as you can get it.
Yeah, because there was a son of Mars on the Nazi side of thing,
Yep.
reluctantly, admittedly, but he was there. And there's having to say that your half brother is a Nazi is not a fun thing,
Yeah, just keep it
So-
on the down low.
Yeah, right. We don't talk about that at family gatherings. Anytime my dad starts getting a little lippy, well, at least my son didn't turn into a Nazi. He doesn't like that. He gets very mad whenever I bring that up to him.
That's probably gonna like piss off some people.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I would love to listen to more of this, but unfortunately, we are already out of time.
Absolutely, man. And this was a lot of fun. If you want me to come back on to talk more,
Exactly.
Well,
I really want you to come back more so we can talk more about your because this is for your history because this is really interesting, like really interesting. Plus we've only like finished 3 of the burning questions.
how many did you have?
12.
12. I mean, do you want to rapid fire some, or do you want to just save them for next time?
Okay. Let's do 3 more rapid fire. Then we can do the part. We can do the party with the next 6. Okay.
All right, cool.
The next question was, wait, this one you kind of already knew about, which you already kind of explained earlier, which is, do you remember anything that happened to you in the past 2,000 plus years?
Yes and no. I remember bits and pieces. Unfortunately, nothing is clear. And the parts I do remember are tinged by the way that Augustus perceived it.
Okay, perfect. Next question is, do you have any kids? Because I mean, be it as it is now, I mean, do you have any kids like right now or in your past life? And would it be possible that you've met your descendants?
So yes, actually. So my current iteration does not. I do not have any kids. However, the previous incarnations have had kids, and I actually, funny enough, have served underneath one of my own children at one point. And there was a very heartfelt conversation that we had during one of my previous incarnations. And there's something weird about talking to your son, who is 60 years old, and having memories of them when they're a child, even though that wasn't you. So
that is some Fallout 4 shit right there.
yeah, exactly. Actually, that's actually a very good way of looking at it. So yeah, and I will go into more details on that one. So if you want to, put a 13th question of, what detail, like.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm definitely gonna do that.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. I think I'll leave the rest for next time, except for one more, which I do need to ask right now.
Go ahead.
Have you ever jacked off with the Fist of Mars?
No. So I tried once, and after it got really weird. Funny enough, right? So the arm tries to match my body temperature as closely as possible.
Sure.
Right. Well, it turns out your hand is not the same temperature as your internal body temperature.
True.
It's actually a little bit cooler. So it was like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Oh God, what did Dad do? And so, unfortunately, I had to go lefty from then on out, which is right-handed, left-handed. Feels weird, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Okay, I think that's enough information from your history.
Good question. I appreciate that. So I will say thank you so much. Do I call you KZ?
Yeah, just Casey.
Yeah, KZ. Thanks so much for having me on, man. And I had a lot of fun. This is the most I've actually got to discuss and get in depth with the Mythos and the Mythos Hunters.
It sounds like it.
So the thing is, I have so much knowledge from my time in the Mythos Hunters, and because I have to be careful with who I talk to and how much I talk to them about. When it comes to the Mythos, it feels good to be able to actually get out and talk about it. In a situation where I can divulge some stuff without having to worry about it breaking the massacre.
Okay, yeah, perfect. This has been really, really fun just learning about your entire history and how you've basically adapted and fought through the ages against different things, like the Nazis, I'm assuming like the Confederates, of course, with the Civil War, and your half brother. Just seeing how your entire universe works, because this is a very interesting one, considering that you are living in a world where creatures can just manifest themselves just from pure belief.
Yeah. And that's in and of itself. If you want some good stories, I will make sure to have some stuff, prepped for you next time to tell you about some of my favorite monster hunts.
Oh yes,
from this
please.
life
That would
and
be
previous
that'd be
lives.
great.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for taking such an interest in the.
Anyway, everyone, all my embers, all the chats from Augustus stream, I hope you enjoyed this Burning Questions episode. This is definitely going to be part 1 of the Augustus Martis line. We will discuss when the next episode will air, but please stay tuned in my Twitter and I will announce it there. So anyway, till then, I hope everyone has a great day. Bye bye now.
Bye.